We are controlling transmission. If we wish to make it louder, we will bring up the volume. If we wish to make it softer, we will tune it to a whisper. Sit quietly and we will control all that you hear. We repeat, there is nothing wrong. You are about to participate in a great adventure.
We interrupt this program with a special bulletin. America is now under martial law. All constitutional rights have been suspended. Remain calm. Do not panic. The comfort you've demanded is now mandatory. National security is more important than individual will.
Hey folks, you are listening to Liberty Unfiltered. I am your host, Steve Long. Welcome back to Liberty Unfiltered on this great Monday night here on K98 Talk. Tonight we're going to be talking about the rise of the police state. Things like, what happens when the people who are paid and sworn to protect and serve become the people we become to fear the most. Why do our local police forces resemble military combat soldiers, and why do these forces, including like the Sheriff's Department, have equipment such as armored personnel carriers and combat tanks? We're going to be talking about this and a lot more. Before I start, I do want to mention that I do think there are some good cops out there. I want to make sure that I get that ahead of things. But why are we seeing more and more media reports of police officers doing crazy shit? Anyway, my guest tonight is CATO political analyst Adam Bates. Adam, are you there?
I'm here.
All right. Thanks for coming on tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So before we start, I wanted to give everybody a chance to know a little bit about you. Did you want to give the listeners a brief background of your experience?
Well, sure. I'm from Oklahoma. I got my law degree and my master's in Middle East Studies at the University of Michigan. Then I came home to Oklahoma and participated in a lot of grassroots political activism. I went through the GOP delegate process from the precinct meetings to all the way to the Republican National Convention in Tampa in 2012. And then this past January, I just started at the CATO Institute in D.C. As a policy analyst doing criminal justice. Oh, I'm also a member of the Oklahoma Bar for the Okies listening.
Very good. So, you have a little bit of experience, or I don't know so much experience, but CATO mentioned that one of your specialties happens to be police militarization. Where do you think the country? Where did we start getting a militarized police? Where do you think it began?
So I think there are basically two moments that you have to look at, and one is the war on drugs, and the other is the war on terror. Right. So the war on drugs really started ramping up in the late 70s through the 80s, and that's where we really saw this shift toward military-style raids and a huge proliferation of SWAT teams. SWAT teams were originally created for things like barricaded suspects, active shooters, hostage situations, to resolve those kinds of highly complicated and potentially violent confrontations. But in the 1980s, that really started shifting to serving search warrants. And now roughly 80% of the SWAT deployments in the United States are to serve search warrants, and the vast majority of those search warrants are drug warrants. So as the demand on the side of the government for more drug enforcement, more drug searches, more drug raids escalated, so did the proliferation of SWAT teams, and then they had to arm the SWAT teams, and you really started getting this kind of militant attitude by the government, by law enforcement toward the drug market. And then with the war on terror post 9/11, and especially after the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, again you had this kind of recalibration of the mindset of law enforcement. We started hearing that everywhere is a battlefield in the war on terror, and the police are the first and last lines of defense in this war on terror. So kind of this warrior mentality, and because of the actual wars that were going on at the time, we started having all this surplus military equipment laying around. So the federal government initiated an alphabet soup of different government programs to facilitate transfers of this military-grade weaponry to local law enforcement, and that includes things like machine guns. It includes mine-resistant vehicles. It includes Stingray surveillance devices. Things that were created for the military for use on the battlefield have ended up in the lockers at local sheriff's departments and police stations.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Stingray. We're actually going to talk about that here in a minute. But going back to this idea of warrior police and they're here to defend, it's gotten really crazy as of late, with specifically things like you see in the news with you get these reports of these policemen killing family pets. It's just as an example. Where would the war on drugs or even the war on terror come into play with incidents like that? Or are we just seeing, psychotic, trigger-happy cops?
Well, again, I think you can point to two separate facts here. One is that it's not clear that we are actually seeing an increase, at least in the last couple years. Not certainly, there's been an increase over the last 30 or 40 years, as I said, as the number of these kinds of SWAT raids have increased. And obviously, when you move from a knock on the door and ask how things are going kind of police policy to kick in the door at 3 a.m.
Right.
and throw flash grenades in and tell everyone to get down, and you don't give people the chance to put their dog away. So obviously, when you ramp up that kind of that escalation, you raise the possibility of having some kind of violent fallout. But at the same time, I think we're also, in the last few years, we're also just seeing, I think, people being more vigilant about reporting these things. I think we're seeing a higher interest in the media of reporting when they get these reports. And, the ubiquity of cameras today and smartphones enable people to film these things that happen. So a lot of this may just be people are more aware of this because of the ease of transmitting information in the digital age. I think largely we can trace these kinds of, a lot of these dog killings and things back to just the increase in military-style raids on people's homes, where people don't have a chance to put the dog away, and the police officers have kind of a neutralize threats first
Right.
mentality. And I also think that it's just a simple matter of there not being any accountability in most jurisdictions for this. We have very loose laws as far as police use of force when they feel threatened, and it's very easy for a police officer to convince a judge or a jury that the dog was a threat, that they felt threatened, and so they had to neutralize the dog for whatever reason. I think a lot of dog owners would object to this. The law doesn't treat the dog as a member of your family. The law treats the dog basically as a piece of property, and
yeah.
Putting down that dog is not really considered much different under the law than breaking down your door.
Okay. So what you're saying is that you think this was always going on anyway, but people are just, it's becoming more to the light because of smartphones and other technology?
Well, again, over the last 30 years, we've certainly seen an increase. We don't have good data on this, as we don't have very good data on many kinds of police uses of force. We don't know how many people are killed by police every year, let alone how many dogs. So there certainly, anecdotally, has been an increase. But what I'm saying is, over the last few years, the last 3 or 4 years, 4 years ago, it didn't seem like these stories were in the news every day. But I think so in the short term, rather than some huge spike in the number of these instances, I think a lot of it can be attributed to people just being better about reporting it and recording it.
Makes sense. All right, well, I want to go ahead and start with the first story I wanted to discuss, and this was something you had just mentioned. You wrote an article about this the Stingray thing that happened or is going on in Baltimore.
Yeah, it's actually going on all across America, but yes, there was kind of a big revelation in Baltimore this week.
So tell us a little bit about that.
So for the uninitiated, which is probably most people, Stingray is a trade name from a company called the Harris Corporation, based in Florida, and they manufacture surveillance equipment for the military and now for law enforcement. And so one of their devices, the most popular one, is called the Stingray. But Stingray has kind of become the industry term for all of these types of devices.
Okay.
So these are called cell site simulators, and what they do is they mimic the signal of a cell phone tower. And these can be portable. I mean, that they can be handheld, they can be mounted in vehicles. So we're not talking a big room full of equipment. We're talking something that a police officer can carry around by hand. And so what they have the capability to force all cellular phones within a given area to connect to the device. And once they're connected to your phone, they can rip identity data off. It's suspected, although the entire program is shrouded in secrecy, that they can probably rip content also, text messages, emails, and intercept the actual content of conversations. Although every law enforcement agency and every federal agency has said they don't do that, it seems the capability does exist. And so over the last 3 or 4 years, it's trickled out very slowly, thanks to a lot of good work by groups like the ACLU, that local law enforcement agencies in many states, at least 21 states, are employing these devices, usually without warrants, often without even court orders, and very little no oversight, no department policies, no judicial oversight, and they're collecting huge swaths of data about innocent people. And there's this program is shrouded in secrecy, and we need to know more about it, and we need to know the capability of these devices and whether they're being employed consistent with the Constitution.
Yeah, it seems to me like it'd be really hard for them to get away with this sort of thing.
Well, Well, I think they have a easier to ask forgiveness than permission mentality about this. So they've just been doing it, and it's only in the last few years, as I said, that people have kind of started finding out about this. And so what has happened is some wary defense attorneys had clients where it wasn't clear to the attorney how the police were able to find their client. So what would happen was they would get these police officers on the stand in court and ask how they were able to locate the defendant. And the police officers would tiptoe around the issue and say things like, well, confidential sources led us to the suspect. And on more and more questioning, it got to the point where the officers were refusing to testify and refusing to divulge the information. And you started having some judges become very frustrated and upset that the government was refusing to divulge this evidence in court. And it got so bad that in many cases you had prosecutors actually withdrawing evidence and dropping serious criminal charges because it was either that or they would be forced to divulge this Stingray technology to the court. So people got away with actual crime, serious criminal behavior, because the government refused to submit evidence about the use of these devices. And it turns out that the Harris Corporation and the FCC, which has regulatory authority over radio-emitting devices like these Stingrays, and the FBI had coordinated to come up with this non-disclosure agreement that they make local law enforcement agencies agree to before they're allowed to use these devices. And this non-disclosure agreement is so secretive that it requires that they not divulge the nature of these Stingray devices, even to judges, to prosecutors, to defense attorneys. The NDA itself says they should drop cases in lieu of actually presenting this evidence to the court. That's how secretive this is, that it's even being kept secret from judges and prosecutors.
That's ridiculous. So is that, what is this thing that happened in Baltimore? Was it a police officer actually admitted to using it?
Right. So in Baltimore, a detective with the Advanced Technical Unit of the Baltimore Police Department acknowledged in testimony that, he didn't disclose the nature of the device. He didn't say how it worked. He didn't say what its capabilities were, but he divulged that his unit had used the device 4,300 times since just in the last few years, since 2007. And that's a lot. That's 4,300 deployments of this device, and whether those were under court orders or whether they were under warrants or whether there were people convicted as a result of these investigations that never knew how the evidence was collected. I mean, it raises a lot of troubling questions, both constitutionally for the people accused of crimes and for all the innocent people whose data was then swept up under this program that had virtually no oversight and no public scrutiny.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how the police are getting away with so much lately.
And I would say this is the kind of thing that where the public can find out about this stuff. The Freedom of Information Act is what has been used, both the federal one and the state-based Freedom of Information Acts, to find out this information. The ACLU has just been tireless in their use of these Freedom of Information Acts, but that's something that anybody can file a FOIA request and find out if your local law enforcement agency has one of these laying around and what kind of policies if any, policies they use to guide their deployment of these devices.
So what, for those listening, what would be the best place on the internet, I guess, to go and learn more about these devices and whether or not their local law enforcement agencies carry them?
Well, you can look me up on CATO and find I've written several pieces about this now, and then also the ACLU. If you just type in, if you just Google ACLU stingray use, the ACLU has been kind of raising the alarm about this for years, long before anybody really even knew what they were talking about. So yeah, the ACLU is probably the best source as far as where you can actually find the documents. They have a map for what parts of America have confirmed uses, and they're very prolific in their use of FOIA requests to try and get to the bottom of this.
Okay, thanks. All right. Well, I think we've sufficiently covered that. Another item that is getting a lot of media attention this last week or so is the incident in South Carolina with the 50-year-old man that was shot and killed by a police officer who claims he feared for his life, but apparently there was somebody taking video where they videotaped him actually shooting the old guy from behind. I'm guessing you've probably heard about this.
Yeah, and I've written about it. I've done a few interviews about it. But yeah, it's almost, there's almost nothing to even say about this, simply because what that video reveals is so far beyond the pale. I mean, it certainly looks like just murder. The video just looks like flat out somebody being murdered. The guy is Mr. Scott is running. He's a good 20 feet away from the police officer, and the officer fires 8 times and hits him 5 times in the back. And then on the video, it certainly looks like the officer picks up his taser and puts it down next to the body of Mr. Scott, which then he filed a police report that said Mr. Scott had taken his taser off of him and that he felt threatened by the taser. And I think that's we should say, and to their credit, in South Carolina, they immediately fired this officer. He's been charged with murder. It seems like the process of holding him accountable is going on as well as could be hoped. But I think the big question, especially in the minds of libertarians and police reformers, is what would we be talking about if we didn't have that video? That wasn't a body camera. It wasn't a dash camera. It was a bystander who just happened to be standing there and had his smartphone on him. So if you go read the police report from before the video surfaced, it tells a much different story. It tells a story of the officer trying to arrest Mr. Scott and then getting into a physical struggle. Mr. Scott, wrestling the taser away from the officer, and then the officer shooting him in self-defense. And if we didn't have this video, it's possible that could be the story that stuck. It would be the only thing we had to go on. And so the question that raises is, how many times has something like that happened? And we simply accepted the police report because that was all the evidence we had. I think that's a very chilling question to consider what we'd be talking about if not for that video.
Right. How many times has this happened that we don't know about? And to use your words, it is definitely very chilling. Things like, what happened in Ferguson, there's so many differing reports as to what actually happened. But in this case, it all seems really cut and dry, simply for the fact that somebody videotaped it. So there's really nothing to question per se, except what the hell was going through this cop's mind.
All right, and when it comes to his eventual trial or more likely plea deal, it does matter. That's good. That's a jury's question in a homicide trial is what's going on in the person's mind. And when all you have to go on is what the person himself wrote about the event, juries are going to trust police officers. They want to believe that police tell the truth and that they do the right thing as best they can, and a lot of them do. But yeah, when you have this video to watch, then I think a lot of people are going to be left wondering what the hell was he thinking. It certainly doesn't look like he was in fear for his life. And I should say that hopefully another lesson we learned from this situation is a lot of people in this country are shocked to find out that we do not keep data on police killings of Americans. We have no, I mean, even somebody like me who researches this for a living, I have no idea how many people the police kill in this country every year. The federal government doesn't keep that information. They can tell you how many people died of whooping cough last year, but they can't tell you how many people were killed by police. So that kind of deficiency of information really hurts the argument for how pervasive a problem this is and how we should reform it.
Yeah, not having any data like that's a bit disturbing.
Well, the FBI theoretically collects data on justified homicides by law enforcement, but whenever anyone has tried to do an independent analysis just based on Freedom of Information requests and media reports, they found that law enforcement agencies are only part of that program voluntarily. They're not obligated to report killings to the FBI. And then the law enforcement agencies that do report, several independent analyses have shown that they underreport maybe by as much as half. So even if you go to the FBI's crime statistics or homicide statistics, you can find a number, but the problem is virtually nobody, including the director of the FBI, has any faith in that number at all. It's woefully underrepresented.
Wow, that's scary. Well, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break, and when we come back, I've got some other stories to talk about. So we'll be back in just a few minutes, folks. But thanks for tuning into Liberty Unfiltered. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
Are you conservative in a world of liberal?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're not alone. Hey, I'm Daniel Stafford, host of the Stafford Voice, and I'd like to invite you to tune in each Monday, 10 p.m. Eastern, where I'll break down the events of the week, and together we'll learn about how they affect you. So, sit back and get ready for the good, the bad, and the ugly of talk radio right here on K98 Talk.
This is Misty, owner of Wax It Studio in Edmond, Oklahoma, and I'm here to talk to you about a skincare product called Theramedics. Theramedics has a wonderful line of products from anti-aging to hyperpigmentations all the way to acne. In fact, everyone at some point in our life is affected by acne. Acne can cause a great deal of embarrassment and anxiety, and in order to prevent and help other people, I have tapped into this wonderful product called Theramedics. Visit my website at www.prettyskindeep.com. Again, that's www.prettyskindeep.com.
Good day to you. As a distinguished gentleman, I need a serious source of news. One that doesn't waste my time when I'm enjoying my tea and crumpets.
White powdered! White powdered!
One that catches the most important stories of the day.
The poop plane.
Was it jet poop?
Real serious nonsense. Mondays, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, now on K98 Talk.
I'm gonna just move in another direction towards the classy.
We'll be classy and not say dildo.
They're completely different from shows that aren't.
Not on my watch, our military service members say, as they volunteer to serve. As they move out, stand firm and take fire. So not on our watch, we say, to the severely ill or injured veterans who can't get the care they deserve to live full and independent lives, even when there's no government funding or a nursing home seems like the only option. We won't leave one warrior behind. Not on our watch. Join us at findwwp.org.
All right, folks, we are back. You are listening to Liberty Unfiltered here on K98talk.com. And we are here every Monday night. Tonight we're talking about the rise of the police state with CATO policy analyst Adam Bates. Adam, again, thanks for coming on tonight.
Thanks again for having me.
So we've been talking about, before the break, we were talking about policemen that basically get away with murder. What I'd like to talk about next is something that isn't quite as horrifying, but still really disturbing. And this is what I'll refer to as the rise in what seems to me to be needless arrest of young children. For instance, there's a story that I was reading earlier today about a 11-year-old in Lynchburg, Virginia. The boy was apparently autistic. So if anybody, if you know anybody that's autistic, you know that they do have not necessarily developmental problems, but they're just, you can consider them special needs. Let's put it that way. Anyway, this 11-year-old in Lynchburg, Virginia, Caleb Moon Robinson was his name, was arrested and charged with disorderly conduct when he got upset and kicked a trash can in his classroom. What makes the story even more disturbing is a few weeks later, he was in his school, and as he was leaving his classroom, another policeman grabbed him and then slammed him down to the ground and handcuffed him, arresting him again. This time, the boy was charged with felony assault on a police officer. The reasoning for this charge was that when the police officer grabbed him, he pushed the officer away, trying to get away from him. This is not the only time I've heard of strange reports like this coming, but I wanted to get your take on it, Adam.
Yeah, so this is, what in the policy field we'd call a byproduct of overcriminalization. This idea that rather than policing rape and murder and theft and things like that, that we've extended the role of the police officer and thus the role of the violent state to handle even the most mundane issues that in years past would have been handled by the community, by families or by schools. So yeah, you end up with situations where school behavioral problems that even, I mean, we're not talking 50 years ago. We're talking when I was in high school, kicking a trash can. You got detention. You didn't have you didn't have a police officer calling that whatever destruction of property, and then arresting you for assault if you looked at him funny or if you resisted his efforts to arrest you. So yeah, it's a serious problem to have police officers, to turn what are routine disciplinary problems in schools into criminal matters. And it's not just a situation of the risk of police violence, because police are not used to handling situations peacefully. They think a lot of police officers may be lacking in their nonviolent mediation skills, but these kinds of charges, these kinds of, and if they're convicted, these things can follow you for a long time. They can ruin your life to have these kinds of things on your record, or even the experience itself. A lot of times when juveniles are arrested, depending on their jurisdiction, they're taken to adult facilities, and because they can't be put in with adult detainees or prisoners, they end up in solitary confinement, which is a horrifying experience for a developing person. It's just an all-around horrifying practice, and from the libertarian perspective, the argument is this is the inevitable byproduct of using the police and using the criminal law, the criminal justice system, to solve problems that it wasn't meant for.
Right. I mean, why couldn't the school just handle this? I don't understand that. And I mean, this is not an isolated case. There was another autistic boy, Colton Granito. I didn't get where in the United States this happened, but again, autistic kid, and he throws a temper tantrum in class. So the teacher's first response is to call the police. So the police come, and the boy is arrested and charged with assault. So this is obviously not just a problem with the police, although when the police arrived on the scene, why didn't they just say, not our problem? That's one way of looking at this, but also what is possessing the teacher in these cases to first response to call the police for an 8-year-old boy throwing a temper tantrum?
Yeah, well, so a lot of school officials will invoke the boogeyman of litigation or liability to explain why they have these kinds of zero tolerance policies. Although if you actually look at the court records, it doesn't seem that there is it doesn't seem that to be justified. There aren't a lot of public school districts in America that were being sued out of existence. But that's something they'll claim. I think in a lot of cases it's just easier. It's just easier to let the police handle something like that, despite the fact that the police aren't trained. That's not really part of their role to be foster parents to kids. They see things through the lens of the criminal justice system, and so whereas a kid shoving a principal, especially somebody with mental issues, bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or some various types of autism, if they lashed out at a school official, that's something that the school official could overlook. If you lash out at a police officer, that's right at the core of their training, not to tolerate that, and by the letter of the law, it is a serious criminal offense. Right. And these are not isolated incidents by any stretch. I mean, the entire concept has a name. It's called the school to prison pipeline, and it's this idea of certain groups of people, especially people with mental issues or people from very disadvantaged backgrounds. They start getting institutionalized from a very young age. They become part of the criminal justice system. Even when they're in, second or third grade, they get handcuffed and taken to jail, and they become part of this system. And study after study shows that those kids are at very, very high risk for becoming criminals and for basically spending their entire lives, coming in and out of the criminal justice system. And it's a serious problem, and it can, a lot of these things have socioeconomic issues and history that goes into this. But yeah, part of the problem is our penchant for viewing every single behavioral issue as something that should be handled by the criminal justice system.
When in fact the police have no business, disciplining children.
If bad things happen in schools, if somebody gets stabbed or somebody gets beat or something of that nature, I don't think there's going to be too much complaint about having police involvement. But it's the use of police for these very routine disciplinary issues that kind of makes people scratch their heads a little bit about how these things can spin so fast from a kid kicking his desk over to being a felon.
Yeah, no, I'm just talking about like your normal everyday disciplinary issues, like a kid kicking a trash can.
So yeah, the idea is there has to be some room in the life of a human being to do stupid things and to do bad things, to make mistakes, and not have them ruin your life and follow you for the rest of your life. And increasingly, we treat the most trivial behavioral issues as something that marks these kids for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, it's really ridiculous. And all of this that is going on with these what I refer to as wrongful arrest, and everything else we've been talking about is all due to the fact that America is essentially becoming a police state. And who knows if it'll ever change. Perhaps if more and more people take these videos and all of these incidents come to light on a more, on a national level, maybe the police will think twice before they commit these atrocious acts. You never know.
Well, I think it's kind of a morbid thought, but I think one of the aspects of this that is going to start getting some attention, even if the moral issues don't win at the polls. I think we're starting to see a lot of politicians, including many Republicans and fiscal conservatives, start looking at prison budgets and how much it's actually costing to have this kind of prison state, this kind of police state. And when people feel the fiscal crunch, there are a lot of working age men in this country that just sit by themselves in cages all day, and the taxpayers are on the hook to provide for them 24/7. And so we are starting to see some rumblings from the political class that this can't continue. This is a tremendous, setting aside the arguments about whether all this stuff should be illegal in the first place, but this is a tremendous waste of resources and economic potential to have so many people sitting in prison for so many years.
Yeah, it's gotten quite ridiculous. Now, on a more, I guess you could say a lighter note, another article that I saw of yours was in reference to New Mexico's Governor Susan Martinez, who recently signed a bill that would effectively abolish civil asset forfeiture.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, civil asset forfeiture is, another byproduct of police state, and let's talk a little bit about that.
All right. So, actually, the idea of civil asset forfeiture is actually one of these relics from the Middle Ages, basically. This idea that property could be guilty or tainted with guilt, not just people. It's from a concept called deodand, centuries ago. That was property that was used in commission of a crime would be forfeited to the crown, and the crown would sell the property and then put the proceeds to some charitable purpose. But so it's this concept has kind of floated incognito through Western jurisprudence for centuries, and it made its way into American law, and it really didn't come up that much. It's kind of this obscure artifact of past legal traditions. But again, starting with the war on drugs in the late 70s and 80s, the government drug warriors basically dug up this concept and resurrected it, and then it's spun quickly out of control. So basically, the idea of civil asset forfeiture is if you are doing something bad that you're not supposed to be doing, you don't deserve to profit from that. So the state claims the right to take anything that you're using to further this criminal enterprise, whether it's your house, your car, your bank account, and also to take any kind of proceeds that you reap from this criminal behavior. So criminal asset forfeiture requires, as the name implies, requires a criminal conviction. So you've been convicted of being a drug dealer, the duffel bag full of drug money that they found when they arrested you, you don't get that back. That goes to the state. Civil asset forfeiture, on the other hand, is a much more controversial and I would say inherently abusive practice, which is the same thing, taking your property, taking money, taking houses, cars, but in the civil context, it doesn't require a criminal conviction. It can occur simply because the government suspects that you're engaged in some kind of illegal behavior, and they don't even have to charge you with the crime. And billions of dollars have been taken from Americans, both by state and local law enforcement and by the federal government, under civil asset forfeiture laws. And these are people who, in many cases, were never accused of a crime. And in many cases, they never did anything wrong. All it takes is a very slow hurdle of suspicion on the part of a police officer or a prosecutor that you're engaged in some kind of bad behavior, and they can take your money, they can take your car, they can basically ruin your life. They can empty your small business account, which is something that's happened to several people, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars just disappearing out of your bank account. And so over the last years, we started to see more and more horror stories about the abuse of this concept of civil asset forfeiture, and I think we finally hit a point where you're starting to see some pushback against this, that the government overstepped its bounds. It engaged in this practice unchallenged for so many years that I think it may be a case that they just got too cocky about it. They got too brazen, and you're starting to see some pushback from both from the federal government. Eric Holder has announced several reforms to civil asset forfeiture at the federal level, and now you have bills in several states, including New Mexico, basically to abolish civil asset forfeiture. And require a criminal conviction, and that's great. I think most people, when they hear civil asset forfeiture, this is something they don't think should happen in a country that claims to value due process and private property.
Well, that just another example of how asleep at the wheel the people of the United States are. I mean, they just don't pay attention to things like this. You talk about civil.
Well, I would say, the police are smart. The government's smart. They know, and this is unfortunate, but the government knows who it can pick on, and it knows who it can't pick on. So for years, this is something that people in the black community have known about. This is something you can see on TV shows about the drug war, like The Wire, where the police will just walk up and shake down everybody on a street corner and walk off with their money. I think a lot of people might watch that and say, "Oh, well, those are just, that's just depicting bad cops or whatever." But no, that's depicting our actual civil forfeiture regime. But like I said, I think the police started to overplay their hand a bit, and they started ripping off the wrong people, and they started getting all the bad kinds of attention that tend to happen when they expand these abusive law enforcement practices into communities that have the political and social capital to stand up to them. And so, yeah, I think we're starting to get that pushback.
Yeah. So I guess can you tell me a little bit about the history of this bill? Like why it came about and...
Well, there are actually several. Oklahoma has this basically the same language languishing in committee right now from Nathan Dahm. There's a bill in Texas that's much the same language. A lot of this is coming out of ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, who publishes this kind of model legislation. But in the case of New Mexico, it's actually a great instance of bipartisanship, and the bill passed both houses of the New Mexico legislature unanimously, and then was signed by Susana Martinez. And I think, hopefully, that is a lesson that really civil asset forfeiture is such a fundamentally abusive practice. There's really no excuse for this to be a partisan issue. If you're a Republican, you're supposed to value private property and the rule of law. And if you're a lefty or a liberal, you're the fact that the police are exploiting and preying on especially disadvantaged communities. There's essentially no defense of civil asset forfeiture. The only defenses you'll see from police or from government officials is this money really helps. The money we get from civil asset forfeiture is a vital tool for law enforcement. So basically, I mean, the arguments they have in their favor are we like the money, and going through the criminal process and securing a conviction takes a lot more time, and it costs more, and we may not win. So civil asset forfeiture, we just get to take the stuff. And I think, regardless of your political affiliation, that's not a good enough argument, and that's why I think you're starting to see this become an issue on both sides of the aisle and around the country.
You're right. There's no reason this should be a partisan issue. We're talking about your constitutional right to private property. Well, I mean, it's good that some states are passing laws to prohibit this, and hopefully Oklahoma will become one of those. And who knows? I guess we'll see as that process continues. Well, Adam, we are about done here. Did you have any last minute thoughts you wanted to leave with our listeners?
I don't think so. I think running my mouth for the last hour, they've probably got their fill.
Well, folks, you can read Adam's blogs, articles, whatever you want to call them, by going to CATO.org. That's CATO.org. You can also read. Do you want to? Is it okay if we give them your Twitter account?
Yeah, I don't tweet all that much, but sure, it's just Adam Taylor Bates on Twitter.
Well, you know, Adam, you actually tweet a lot more than you think because you have your Twitter hooked up to your Facebook account. So every time you post something on Facebook, it goes to Twitter.
Oh, well, then I probably am a pretty prolific tweeter.
You are. That's actually how I catch most of your most of the things you've been writing lately, because I don't really get on Facebook too much anymore. But yeah, that you can check him. It's at Adam Taylor Bates. So check him out there. And just one last time, thanks for coming on the show, and hopefully we can have you on again sometime.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Good luck with your future with CATO.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
You too. Well, folks, that is all we have for tonight. Stick around after the show and catch the next one. It's Real Serious Nonsense with Angie and Pohl. I think tonight they're going to be talking about Hillary's announcement that she is going to run for president. It's very disturbing. Anyway, you have been listening to Liberty Unfiltered here on K98 Talk. I am your host, Steve Long, and we will be back next Monday at 7 p.m. Central. Thanks for tuning in, folks.